with this, and I can tell you guys, really, I'm going to ask you to stay to the very end. There's some just absurd information that's going to be delivered, and one of the things that I'd really ask you to do is really just to focus a lot. I know that sometimes you have the distractions and you have to be moving here and there, but you really don't want to miss anything, not a drop, not a piece of it. And by the way, guys, at the end, we will have some call to actions and some things that we really want, some new insights and some things that we want you to get from this, and some things you can take away, which to me is the most important part of it, because we keep telling people that although we think information is what causes transformation, but I think it's with the information and the execution that causes transformation. So it's not just information. You can get this and leave and nothing happens, but if you know really how to execute it, how to put it in a particular framework and get the right coaching, mentorship, and leadership around, and having a leadership framework around it, I'm certain that everything will change for you and your life won't be the same. Let me introduce myself. My name is Dwayne Lufong. I am the chairman and founder of Think Grow Lead, and been in business for the last, I founded TGL about 5 years ago, and we've expanded into a formidable group, including the TGL Recruiting, TGL School of Sales, which is the first sales schools in the sales school of sales in the Caribbean. We have TGL Smile, which is a formidable player in the world of customer service, which is a fusion of neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, and customer service fundamentals. So that's a company to watch. And we have Think Grow, which has to do with sales development, whether it is in-house or external sales development. So guys, that's the TGL group in a nutshell. So a quick background, because I really want us to jump into this thing very quickly, and really why I really, I'm excited about starting this conversation with you guys. A couple of years ago, I'd say about maybe 10, 15 years ago, I jumped into business and did extremely well for a couple of years. So I tend to tell people I muscled my way to success. When we got the first, what we call in 2008, 2009, the recession, and it's very similar now to what is happening with COVID, where you're seeing business downturn, you're seeing revenues being affected, and you're just seeing just business being affected just because of loss of sales, loss of revenue, and there's a significant impact on income. One of the things that I can tell you will happen now is that your leadership will be tested. Whatever your business strategy is, it will be tested. Everything about you and your business now will be tested. And a part of really what I think people will need is a good psychological framework to really go through this period. My personal story is that I had a really, it affected me badly, not because I lost the skill, but I did not have the confidence, the drive, and the outlook to survive. And, in retrospect, looking back 10, 15 years ago, knowing what I know now and what I developed a couple of years after that is the psychological skill and muscle, guys. And the reason why I'm excited about, the NLP program and using NLP, which is really just using your mind to get results, is that everything about success really has to do more with your internal structure, which means that you will win more having a good internal constitution, having a good framework around your thinking, how you feel, your consistent actions, your belief, your outlook, all of these things that you can't touch and feel, your intangibles, but they weigh higher on the degree of success, which is up to 80%. And if you have that, I can tell you, everything will be well great if you execute and make it work. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about is the amazing ladies that we have that will kind of run through this webinar today. And one of the things that I like is that I met Liz a couple of years ago, and one of the things that I've always known about her is not just the fact that she is a certified trainer and master coach of NLP, but that I know that she used to be with the tourism sector, and I knew that she trained hundreds of people. And if you see there, it says over about 400 people's 400 person in various aspects of NLP. She has had over about 25 years of human resource development experience, and this focus has really been on hospitality and tourism. She has designed and developed and delivered various training consultancies, including customer service. We spoke about that. She being the managing director for TGL Smile, and project and strategic management. So Liz will be our webinar lead facilitator today, and she is joined by, last but not least, the amazing Tanya Smith. Tanya also is a NLP certified master coach. And guys, I want you to pay attention to this, because the persons that you'll be hearing and that will be conducting the webinar really have tremendous experience in NLP, in the framework around it and the art and science of it. So you're dealing with professionals that have been trained to do it. Tanya is really equipped and understands the world of training and development. She's an expert and really an all-around problem solver. One of the things that I was fascinated by, because there are a lot of entrepreneurs that tend to really, actually need the help a lot more, because they don't have a major framework around them, especially in a session in a setting where there's a lot of people in a team that they can pull on. So most entrepreneurs basically need to seek guidance and coaching, sometimes separate, outside of their circle. And she has helped a lot of entrepreneurs and professionals to really reconnect with their true selves and really understanding really how to, think outside of the box, and how to tap into their level of willingness and commitment to do whatever it takes to win, and to develop a different level of thinking to solve some of the problems that they are facing. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, what I'd love to do is to introduce my two beautiful, let me just add, an amazing webinar facilitator and co-facilitator. And guys, first let me just say, hold on to your seatbelts. It's a very exciting webinar you're about to be a part of. And please take some notes, because it's going to go a little bit quick, but they'll slow it down at the end so you can understand exactly how to take action at the end. So guys, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you, Dwayne. Wow, I mean, that's quite introduction. And now for the delivery. So we want to step right into it. And as you can see, there is a question up here. We want to know what concerns and commitment have brought you to this webinar. Now, you'll see that there is a poll that is up. And I'm going to ask Roxanne to put up the next poll, which is the questions about why you are here. So there's another poll coming up now, Roxanne. And if you can just put that up. And if that doesn't come up in a second, then I'm going to ask you in the chat box to simply indicate what are the key reasons that you are here. Now, some of those reasons might have to do with, cash flow, or they may have to do with changing your business model. It may have to do with fear. It may have to do with the fact that, you are losing staff or have had to lay off staff. So all of those things may be, here's the poll. The poll is up now. So if you can just go ahead and answer the questions that are in the poll. What has brought you here? So there are a number of answers there. So just go ahead and let me know what it is that is your major concern, because we want to make sure that this webinar speaks to the concerns that you have specifically. So I'm seeing things like positioning for the future, managing virtual teams, absolutely. Changing business model. Yeah, surprisingly, cash flow challenges are not at the very top of the list. Yeah, positioning for the future. Managing virtual teams. Very good, guys. Thank you. Thank you for that. Staff morale and engagement. Yeah, that's a big one. That's a very, very big one. There's a lot that has been happening over the last 2 months, and a lot that will change going forward as well. So as you're completing it, I see the poll changing a bit, but still out in front, positioning the future. That seems to be a number one concern. 44%, in fact, staff morale engagement, at 11% managing virtual teams, pretty high up there as well. Okay, so thank you very much for providing that information. Really, really important. So let's get back to our presentation and COVID-19. So we all have been going through an unprecedented experience. Nowhere and at no time have we witnessed the kind of lockdown, the kind of changes, the social distancing, the self-quarantining. We haven't experienced this ever. And so it is not surprising that a number of people are feeling a lot of fear, because fear is natural when we are put into an unknown situation. So COVID-19 has really and is really stretching us greatly. Now, I'm not sure if you are familiar with this book by Joseph Campbell. It's called The Hero's Journey. Some of you may be aware of it. And just to just quickly summarize what's in it, it's really about an individual who goes out on an adventure, just like any hero. And as he goes out on that adventure, he faces trials and, lots of challenges, risks that he has to manage. And finally, at the end, there is some light, and he returns with some additional resources. He's able to, and while I'm saying he, I'm not forgetting the ladies on the call. So he or she is picking up good resources. And when we say resources, we're talking about what we call in NLP learnings, things that you have that are part and parcel of who you are. And if you didn't go through this journey, then you wouldn't have had access to them. So very much like the butterfly, in fact, very much like the butterfly, when in a cocoon, if you were to try to help that butterfly and cut that butterfly out, that butterfly would never fly. Because the truth is that it needs to press against the cocoon in order to build the strength in the wings. And that is what allows the butterfly to fly. And so similarly, as individuals, I think it's really important that we see this experience in a different light. So that's the first thing. How can we reframe this narrative, this COVID narrative that we have been exposed to? Is there another perspective that we can see? Because the truth is, if we're able to do that, then we begin to change things considerably. So I want to turn over now to my co-facilitator, Tanya, who is going to talk a little bit about neurolinguistic programming and how NLP, as we call it, can help you access what we call your superpowers to enable you to not only get over COVID, but to reposition for the future and really get you started on a new trajectory. So over to you. Take it away, Tanya.
Great, thank you, Liz. So as Liz mentioned in her, analogy of the hero's journey, and also what Dwayne mentioned in his intro, is that NLP, we're looking at NLP as being the leadership COVID vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine, to help leaders navigate in the change and the uncertain times, which is all arising with COVID. So when we talk about NLP, NLP is really looking at what are the programs and the things that we are doing internally. So when we look at it breaks down into 3 different parts. So we look at neuro, which is looking at our thinking patterns. So how do our thinking patterns affect our experiences? So how are we creating our experiences? Linguistic. So what is the verbal and nonverbal languages that we use to communicate to others, but also to ourselves, which includes self-talk? And then programming. So what are the strategies that we're using to achieve our results? So the actions that we're taking and the strategies that we're using to get those results. So that's NLP in a nutshell. Now, some people ask, what's the difference between NLP and other coaching or self-development models that are out there? So the one thing that NLP does, provides models, processes, but also technologies and techniques that on the how do I do things? A lot of times when we're coaching or when we experience all these different frameworks that have to do with self-development, they tell us, all the things that we should be doing, but how do we do them? And I think that's where the breakdown happens for people is how do I do these? How do I put these into practical applications in my day-to-day to help me be better as a leader and to be better as a person? So that's a good breakdown of NLP and how it's different from all the other models that exist out there. So when we look at how we see ourselves, so as Liz mentioned earlier in the hero's journey, a lot of our actions or the behaviors that we have are around how do we see ourselves. So when we look at our experiences that we're put into, what limiting beliefs do we have about ourselves? So I'm going to ask you this question. What things are you limited by, or what are some of the thoughts that you have that are limiting decisions that you have decided that you have about yourself, whether it's as a leader in your business, as a leader in your company, or in your personal life? And you don't have to share them with us. This is just something for you to jot down and to think about how these things are affecting your actions and your implementation of things. How do you see yourself? Because a lot of how we see ourselves drives, our behaviors and the things that we do. So when we go over on looking at why NLP, or why would we even want to use NLP to begin with, there's a couple of great reasons of why NLP kind of helps us. So when we look at NLP, it kind of helps us, identify the gaps that we have within ourselves and provides us with tools on how to fill those gaps to get from the things that we don't want to the things that we desire, to the goals that we want. So it looks at helping us control our own state of mind, so how we're thinking about things, so we can pivot them to make different decisions and have different actions and different results. It also helps us to develop powerful communication skills. So a lot of us are in challenging times right now. Some of the polls said that a lot of you are looking at the difficulties around managing virtual teams. How are we communicating with them? Because a lot of communication has nothing to do with the words that we're saying to people. It's also, body language, but we're not seeing body language when we're managing our teams virtually. So how do we use those skills and the skills that we can get from NLP to help us drive that strategy that we may have? What are the experiences that we want to have with our thinking? So our thinking will help us to drive the experiences that we want to have and the success that we want to have. So again, thinking differently, being able to make different decisions. And when we look at empowering ourselves, when we are as leaders, a lot of what we do, we need to do for ourselves first. So they always says that leadership has a lot to do with us versus other people. So how are we being as a leader? But then how do we use that information to empower ourselves and then be able to use that in a coaching experience to empower others, with whether it's in our teams or whether it's in our homes and our families? So again, using the strategies that we have around empowering ourselves to then be able to use that and then to coach others. So that's NLP in a nutshell. And I'm going to pass it over to my co-host here, my host Liz, who's going to now take us into some great steps on how we can apply some of these things that we're talking about. There
Liz,
you
you're
go.
muted.
We can hear you now. We can hear you now. We're good. Oops, you're muted again. Let's see.
Good.
Great.
Yes, I'm back on. Great. So thank you very much, Tanya, for that introduction to NLP. And now we know how NLP can help us to access and unlock our superpowers. So speaking of superpowers, the first one that I want to speak about now is I am cause to my effect. And this is really, really fundamental to everything that we do in neurolinguistic programming. It's like the number one principle that we have to follow. So I found this quotation and I thought it was really, really appropriate for this evening. It says, stop blaming outside circumstances for your inside chaos. Now, I know some people might be going, oh my God, what is she saying? That, you know, I have all of this excitement and drama going on outside and I'm supposed to not feel chaotic inside. Well, we can show you exactly how you can, as we call it, maintain your state and ensure that you are being cause to your effect. So the first principle is I am 100% responsible for all my thoughts, feelings, and actions. So I may not be able to control everything that happens externally, but what I do have absolute 100% control over are my thoughts, how I feel, and my behavior. So that's the first principle that you need to get on board with. Now, this is a framework and a model that I wanted to introduce you to because it's really important. Now, if you look at number 2, which says do, it says something that perhaps many of you are already familiar with. So it's a cycle that starts with planning, doing, check, and act. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you who have been exposed to any management principles would have seen this already and be quite familiar with it. Now, what we may not be quite so familiar with is number 1. And that is really critical if we are going to move on and be successful at the next step, which is 2, doing. The first step is being. So who are we being in this moment? And by being, I'm referring specifically to how are we thinking and how are we feeling. These are critical in our beingness, if you will. Now, I would say the majority of us at this time are probably feeling a fair amount of fear, anxiety, some kind of, overwhelm perhaps, or even frustration. And I wanted to just share with you a couple of things about why this is so. So let's start with the fear response and what triggers it. So fear actually is brought on and triggered by an automatic response by our reptilian brain. Now, our reptilian brain is the oldest part of our brain. So as the name suggests, this goes back a really long way till when we were living in caves and out in the wilds. And we had to defend ourselves against, tigers and maybe other tribes and so forth and so on. And so our reptilian brain is instinctual. It's the part of us that automatically responds and automatically responds to situations where there is danger. And danger to our reptilian brain is anything that is unknown, anything that is unfamiliar. So what we're going through in COVID right now is exceedingly unknown territory for all of us. And so it's just for you to appreciate that what you are feeling right now is actually starts by a neurochemical response. So your reptilian part of your brain then releases certain neuropeptides. And those neuropeptides cause a particular reaction chemically in our body, and that triggers the fear. Now, if we understand what is happening, then we have the possibility to do what we call a pattern interrupt. Once we know that that's what's happening, we can now interrupt the pattern and do something different. So we then go into fear, and the next thing is that we usually do one of three things. We either want to fight, we want to flee, take flight, or we freeze. And right now, most of us are in freeze mode. I was just having a discussion with a friend of mine, and he was telling me about, people wanting to kind of not stock up and not plan for the future for fear of what that is going to look like in the future. So if I, stock my shelves and it's not hand sanitizer or toilet paper, then will people come and buy it? So there's a lot of fear. And so anything that is different, we are going to be, sorry, that was an accident. We are going to be fleeing, fighting, or freezing. And right now, most of us are in freeze mode. Now, an important thing to understand with freeze mode is when we are in any of those, in fact, fight, flight, or flee, it shuts down our creative responses. It means that we do not make very good decisions. It means that it's difficult for us to think outside the box. And truthfully, that's what we need more than anything right now. We need to be able to access our creative power, our innovation. And if we are not able to do that, then, like I say, we're in big worries. So, thinking and feeling. How are we being? And that is observed by others through the vision that we have for our staff. So how are we putting across that vision? What are our values? And what is our leadership style? Are we just about, making the money? Are we engaging? Are we showing a certain level of caring about staff and customers? These are all things that are observed in our doing, but they start with how we are thinking and feeling. And I think that's really something that I want you to take away. So we have to be able to step back before we do in order to have the success that we want. So crisis management will lead you directly into doing. And that's important for you to understand. That's the knee-jerk response. That is, I'm going to do, exactly what comes to mind immediately. So that might be, I'm going to let go of my staff. And maybe it is that you have to do that. Or maybe you are on the other side of the coin. Maybe you are one of those persons who has been let go, who stands now in a position where you thought you'd never be. You had a job, you thought you were secure, and now all of a sudden your security has, been pulled, the rug has been pulled from under your feet. So it's crisis management is the doing. You're going to just simply do something, and what we're saying is that we want you to step back and think about who you are being. What are you thinking, and what are you feeling? And the two are intrinsically connected. How you think is going to then lead to how you are feeling. So, cause and effect. What are some of the things that this really brings about? Cause and effect. I remember the first time I saw this, I thought, it's some kind of mathematical equation. For those of you who remember equations at school, cause is greater than effect. That's really what that says. And so the question is, which side of the equation are you on? If you are on the effect side of the equation, you will always have reasons for why things aren't going well. And I'm talking about even in COVID times, because I know persons who have completely retreated. And so they throw their arms up in the air and they say, whoa, I can't cope with this, or I just absolutely don't know what to do. So they find reasons for not achieving the goals that you have set for yourself. Which one of you had strategic plans for this year? Can I see the hands? Which one of you had strategic plans for this year? Yeah. And you can put it in the chat box. Did anybody have a strategic plan that you had for this year? Goals that you had set? And so my question is, now, if you had a strategic plan or you had a goal, what are you doing with those goals now? Have you just tossed them away? Have you, shoved them under your bed? Where are those goals now, and what are you doing with them? So if you are going to stick to, Anika says so many. Romana says yes.
Yes.
Many, many goals.
Yes.
So what is it that you are now doing? And how are you thinking and feeling in order to make sure that you still get those goals? Because those who are going to thrive, that's the thinking. That's the thinking. People who thrive, and people, let me tell you, in any situation, in any circumstances, there are always people who are going to thrive. So I want to make sure that you are one of those people, right? So if you have goals, you need to be thinking to yourself now, which side of the equation am I on? Have I tossed out those goals? Do I need to rework them? And I see somebody says, yes, pivoting. I'm going to talk about pivoting in a minute. So who is pivoting? Who is trying to make some changes and still make it happen? If you are that person, then it means that you are on the cause side of the equation. Because when you are on the cause side of the equation, you get results. You are not willing to settle, and you are constantly thinking about, what do I have to do in order to get the goal that I have set? So which side of the equation are you on? So you can just think about that. And the question is, who is sitting in your chair? Is there someone who is sitting in the driver's seat of your life? And have you put COVID-19 there? Is COVID-19 driving your bus now? So remember, get over to the cause side of the equation and take back the steering wheel. Make sure that you get the results that you have planned for. Another framework, which I think is really important to share with you, is E plus R equal O. And actually, O can be plus or minus. It means it can be positive or negative, depending on what the R stands for. So in the first example, event plus reaction equal a negative outcome, it means that there is an event. So let's say there's COVID. There's COVID that has happened, and you are reacting with fear. So your response to that is, okay, I'm going to retreat. I'm going to shutter my business. I'm going to lay off all my staff, and I'll just, wait it out and see what happens. Then your outcome is likely to be negative because you are going to miss the boat. Now that is just a reactionary behavior. What we're saying is that you need to take a different approach. So there's an event, there's COVID, and instead of locking up shop, you are going to respond. You're going to take the time to reflect about, yes, I'm feeling fearful. I'm not going to let that control me. I'm going to do some things that are going to put me out ahead of the pack. I'm going to brainstorm maybe with my colleagues. I'm going to have a visioning exercise with my team. I'm going to engage them. I'm going to respond as different from react. And when you respond instead of reacting, then you're going to get a good outcome. Really means that you have taken back control and you are on the cause side. Now, some of you have been talking about this idea of pivoting, and I've heard it a lot. It seems to be the new buzzword, and I think it's a great idea. And so I always think about the times when, and there weren't that many, but I did play netball. Not on the team, but I did play some netball when I was at school. So I remember this whole idea of pivoting. and you had to be very firmly placed on that foot on which you were going to pivot. It was like your anchor, and then you could turn easily. But if you weren't really anchored well on that foot, you were going to maybe twist, fall, bump into somebody else, not see the person that you wanted to pass the ball to, and so forth. So I wanted to share with you this particular model, and it's developed by a guy by the name of Robert Dilts. Now, Dilts was one of the early proponents of NLP, one of the founders, and he put together this model, which is essentially 5 tiers, and some persons have added another on the top of it called spirituality. And I just want to spend a minute to explain how this works, because it's really important. So at the very top, we have spirituality. Now, spirituality, sometimes people call this your purpose in life. So many of us are looking for that purpose, or may have found it. So what is that purpose that you have? Because that purpose drives everything else in your life. So we read this model from the top down, meaning that the higher up you go on the hierarchy, is the more power and influence that particular piece of the hierarchy has on everything else below. So for example, if you were going to just simply change your behavior, you very likely would not, by so doing, change your values and beliefs and your identity. You might impact your environment, meaning, not just your physical environment, but the people around you, and the technology that you are working with, and so forth. So it may impact that which is around you, but it may not impact further up the chain. So at the very top is identity, and the next down is values and beliefs. Now, your values and beliefs are critical to your thinking, they're critical to your feeling, and they're critical to your behavior. And so when we are doing coaching in neurolinguistic programming, we tend to start as high up the hierarchy as we can at identity or values and beliefs, because it is there that we will be able to be most effective in helping individuals to change. So identity, values and beliefs, skills and knowledge come next. So that develops your capabilities and your capacity. And then your behavior, your actions. What exactly are you doing? So this comes back now to the doing part of that be, do, have model. Above the values and identity and spirituality, that all is part of your being. And further down, your skills and knowledge and behavior are part of your doing. And so really, if you are going to pivot into something else, it's really important that you pivot knowing that you are changing your identity. Who am I? Who do I think I am? Am I that successful entrepreneur? Am I that successful leader? Am I confident? When Dwayne was speaking in his opening remarks, he was speaking to this idea of confidence. And one of the things that he found a bit of a stumbling block in his early years was this confidence. So that's part of your identity and who you are. And then your values and beliefs. Do you have limiting beliefs that might stop you from being, the risk taker if you are an entrepreneur? Do you believe that you have the ability to do the things that you know that you need to do? What are the beliefs that might be preventing you? Do you have all the skills and the knowledge? Now, if you don't have the skills and knowledge yourself, you better make sure that your team does, right? And then you have to take the right action and use that in order to influence your environment, right? So the environment that you can influence, because believe you me, you as a leader, and I'm calling everybody on this call a leader, because no matter where you are in life, even if you don't have the title that says leader, we are all, because we are on this call, we are all leaders. And no matter what, we are either followers or leaders. And because you're here, you must be a leader. You want to change. And that's one of the things that leaders can adapt. So in order to pivot, ladies and gentlemen, you must anchor yourself in an identity, in the values and beliefs, the skills and knowledge and behavior that are going to enable you to impact and change your environment. So what are some superpower actions that I can take right away? So Liz, this is all great, but no, I want to do some practical things. So the first thing that I'm going to recommend that you do is to start the day strong. Make sure that you have a regular discipline in the morning that is going to get you up and going. And I don't mean just having that cup of, coffee or tea. I mean, doing something that is going to influence who you are being. So when I say that, it could be depending on, your spiritual beliefs and practices. It could be prayers. It could be your meditations. It could be your journaling. And I would like to add to that exercise, because exercise is super good for getting your endorphins going and for ensuring that you have the kind of mindset that is going to take you to the next level. So you have to have a praxis every day, a daily praxis that's going to take you to that next level. Secondly, decide to eliminate fear-based thinking. Okay, so you have to make the decision first. You must make the decision that every time I feel that fear coming on, I'm going to interrupt that pattern. And one of the ways that we can interrupt that pattern is to begin to immediately think about things that are positive that have happened, and that maybe resources that you have used before, or telling yourself something different, which leads me to number 3, monitor your self-talk. We all have self-talk, that little voice that goes on in our head, that jabba jabba, and most of the time it's telling us negative stuff. It's criticizing us in some way. Make sure that you begin to listen into it. Some of us are not aware. So listen in and hear, what is it that I am telling myself? And stop it if it's not something that's positive and supporting you in your efforts. Number 4, use strategies to deal with any fear that comes up. So one of the things that you can do, I mentioned earlier, is to tap into your past successes. Right? Tap into your past successes and think about the times when you had challenges before and you overcame them. And what was it that you used in order to overcome them? Breathing. Breathing is super important. Breathing helps to oxygenate your system. When you are in fear, you tend to shallow breathe and shut down the oxygen in your system. So breathing, make sure you breathe deeply. Take in on the count of 4, hold for the count of 4, release for the count of 4, and do that about 4 or 5 times, and you find that it helps to relax you. Use this time for resetting. If you don't have a job, if you are not able to go to work, then, or you have to close your business and have had to do that, use this time to be looking for, how am I going to pivot? What are the things that I can do now? Monitor the trends, look and see what's happening. I know people who have, decided, oh, I'm going to go into the face mask business. I was hearing an interview on television about, some healers who are on the side of the road, and they recognized right away that they had to go into alcohol, hand sanitizers, face masks. This is something that we need to be doing in our businesses and in our lives. Number 6, use mindfulness techniques. One of the things that we tend to forget when we become super focused is to take a break. And neuroscience is telling us that what we should do is, at the end of every 60 minutes of focused activity, we need to take 3 to 5 minutes to divert our attention to something else. It may be as simple as stretching and yawning. Believe it or not, yawning is exceedingly good for relaxing you, for making sure that you are oxygenating your system as well. Doing something, it might be getting up and doing a 2-minute jog, it might be a meditation, it might be something pleasurable that you enjoy doing, but do it for 3 to 5 minutes every hour on the hour of focused activity. When you return, you will come back and you will feel much more refreshed. Good. So, are you seeing here any skills, Tanya? Things that maybe you don't have? Knowledge, skills? It's a question for everybody.
Yes. So one of the things I'd like everyone to do, if you have a phone or if you have a piece of paper, jot down. So on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being not so great, 5 being fantastic, how would you assess your efficiency in applying these skills? So 1 not being so great and 5 being fantastic. And you don't have to share it with anyone, just jot it down for yourselves.
Yeah, super important that we begin to self-reflect. All right, so the next superpower is I broadcast who I am by what I say and do. So we're moving now from the being part of that model into the doing. What you do has far greater impact than what you say. Stephen Covey. I'm sure you'll be familiar with Stephen Covey and all of the wonderful books that he has written, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And so I think what he says counts for something, right? So what you do is much more impactful than what you say. So in that regard, our second principle is empathy and engagement build rapport. Empathy and engagement build rapport. And rapport is fundamental to all our relationships, whether those be with our staff, whether they be with our customers, whether they be with our family. We really have got to recognize that now, perhaps more than ever, we need to be able to build rapport. So, what are some of the things that we can do in order to build that rapport? Now, in NLP, rapport is the ability to match and mirror in every way the other person with whom we are communicating. And we teach you exactly how to do that. So people like people who are like themselves. That's the basis of rapport. So how can you engage your staff? How can you show that empathy and that encouragement that they need right now, and balance it with the need to also ensure that they are productive, that they are not, sinking into depression or just not giving of themselves fully. So one of the things that we believe is required is to be the coach. So you may have been the manager before and not thought of yourself as the coach or the leader or simply the colleague. But now we are called upon to be different. And one of the ways that we can be different and to act differently is to take on the coach relationship with our staff. So daily morning check-ins. So what I mean by that, I mean calling out on our staff and saying, in our Zoom call, if we're meeting on Zoom, if we're meeting in small groups at the office, how are you today? What's going on in your life? Giving them an opportunity to share with you, because that is a necessary part of building rapport and getting close and understanding, appreciating where people are coming from at this time. Secondly, listen with your whole self. Now, I'm saying your whole self because often in our minds we are listening, but we are listening first of all to respond, or we are listening and we are thinking about what we're going to do next, or we are actually multitasking, and it's observable that we are multitasking. And there's nothing more off-putting than someone having a conversation with you and you are actually head down or you're typing at the same time. Because folks, I have learned the hard way that multitasking really is not great efficiency. You have to give your direct and full attention to what you are doing at the moment. And when it comes to building and keeping and maintaining your relationships, this is a very key point. Listen with your whole self. And then ask questions to clarify concerns, because your staff have concerns. So questions like, especially if they're panicking, you know, what would you want to talk about? What would you want me to help you address? Those kinds of probing questions. Where are you struggling? And that might be in terms of the work, right? So where are you struggling with the assignment that you have? What's working well? Helping to turn their minds around to what is working well. What are they paying attention to? Often it's the news, and the news is not all good, is it? It's negative most of the time. So how are we limiting for ourselves and for our staff what they're listening to? So what's working well? Helping them to see the light at the end of the tunnel. What can we learn from that? So they've made an error, they're making some mistakes, they're feeling not so good. What can they learn from that? Because there's always a learning behind it. How can you adjust? How can you adapt? And finally, how can I support you as a leader? I think that's such a critical question to ask, because as a leader, it's really, we are there as a servant to our team. So how can I support the team in getting the result that I want? We have to change, ladies and gentlemen. If you were the type of leader that, you know, you just sort of give out the work and get it done, we have to change how we are relating to our staff during this dispensation. And maybe that might even mean permanently, hopefully. One of the things that we need to do is assess the skill gaps. Now, some of you mentioned in the question as to why you were here, working with teams virtually. So we know that it's more challenging now to work with a virtual team, people that you are not necessarily in the same office with. And if you were one of those managers that actually had a team that was geographically dispersed, then perhaps some of this might be familiar to you. But if not, and you're not accustomed to having Zoom calls and dealing with people on Zoom, then this is a big jump. I know teachers have been having a very warm time making that quantum leap between a classroom situation and now teaching on Zoom. So we need to be assessing the capacity skill gaps. So here, I'm not just talking about your team, but what are your skill gaps in terms of working virtually and leading your teams virtually? How are you managing your productivity? Yes, we have to make sure while we are caring and we are empathizing that we also are holding our team accountable, because if they are not performing, the organization is not going to perform. So we have to keep people engaged, and we do that by checking in, by giving short-term assignments, and by holding people accountable. Meeting customer expectations. So are they able to meet customer expectations at this time? And when I say customer expectations, I'm speaking about especially the relationship management, because oftentimes that's the key. You know, you may not be able to deliver the service that you used to be able to, but how are people relating to you? You know, is a security guard who is holding the door open and letting in 10 people, how is that person relating to the queue that's outside in the hot sun waiting? Yeah. So are we able to meet? What are the needs? Maybe they need some additional customer service training, for example. Understanding team needs and their own expectations, really important. And superpower actions number 2, how to connect with your customers. So listening to your staff feedback, because your staff will give you a really good idea, if you are not the interface yourself, in what is happening with your customers, what are their needs. You may have a customer feedback system, and if you do, then I'd say to you, make sure that you are checking those for updates. There's nothing more frustrating than having a customer feedback system up and running. Customer puts in their information and nobody ever gets back to them. So make sure you check. Reach out to your customers in your database. Make sure that you are touching base with them in some way. Even if it is to say, hey guys, we're still here. We know we miss you. and we're coming back bigger, better, stronger than before. And here are some things that we want you to know, even whilst we are away for the while. So make sure that, and this, in fact, might just be the time when you recognize that you don't actually have a customer database, or you don't have one that's up to date. So this is really important. And the more that we go through COVID is the more we realize that, you know, there's some things that maybe we should have been doing all along that we were not. So here's the lesson. Let's learn it. Make sure that we have our customer database. And finally, give back. You know, is there anything that you can do in terms of volunteering, in terms of, you know, providing something back to your community individually or through your company, to ensure that you're giving back at this time? A lot of people are in dire need. So where are you in terms of your skills?
So again, number 1, not being so great, and number 5, being fantastic. And again, you don't have to share this with you, but where would you assess your efficiency in being able to apply those skills in your leadership role today? So 1 being not so great, 5 being fantastic.
Good. And finally, our superpower number 3, clarity of vision and focus act like magnets. Super important. So George Lucas says, always remember your focus determines your reality. Now, George Lucas is actually the person who produced Star Wars. So that started, I think, probably about 40 years ago. And he knew all about how to focus his attention so that he could get and experience the reality that he wanted. And so here is the principle. Number 3, when I know what I want, I can find the right resources. In fact, I would say to you that often those resources come directly to you. We live in an energetic universe, and how we are thinking and how we are feeling helps to pull towards us the things that we most need. So how does this actually work? So conscious mind and unconscious mind. Now, we know what our conscious mind is. That's a part of our minds that knows you're here and knows you're on this webinar and you're listening in and learning. And there's another part of your mind called the unconscious mind. And that part of our mind is, as you can see from the diagram here, perhaps some would say the most important part of our mind. And the conscious mind has, in terms of its power and influence over our lives, about 5%. The rest, that means the balance of 95%, really falls to the unconscious mind. And most of us don't have a clue what our unconscious minds are doing. So let me just give you one key point here to note about your conscious and your unconscious mind. So our conscious mind is sort of like, I would use the random access memory. Those of you who are into the computer world, excuse me, would understand what I mean. RAM, that part of your computer that is the processing power, but it only is the working memory. Excuse me, it's the working memory. So the working memory tends to be quite small. So there's only a certain amount of things that the RAM, the conscious mind, can actually hold. Now, it means that what we take in to our conscious mind is going to be filtered. And the filtration system is dependent on a number of things. It's dependent on our values and beliefs. It's dependent on our past experiences. It's dependent on our programming. So let me just say, blanket, what we are actually conscious of is dependent on all of our conditioning all through life, up to whatever age we are now, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, wherever we are, we have, ladies and gentlemen, been conditioned and programmed. So that conditioning acts as a filtration system for what we actually become conscious of. Everything else that is coming into our minds, that we are, bombarded by information, and most of it we don't take in consciously, and the rest of it is pushed down into our unconscious mind. So what helps us to filter is called this reticular activation system. So we call it the RAS for short. And ladies and gentlemen, please do not add another S to that acronym. Although it might help you to remember it, right? So the reticular activation system is our filtering system. So how does this work? Well, the easiest way I can explain it is just to give you an example. So a few years ago, I decided I wanted to buy myself a red car. I really do like the color red, and there weren't that many red cars that I saw on the road. And so I decided I was going to get myself the red car, and I did. And as soon as I got that red car, and in fact, as soon as I started focusing on the red car that was, waiting for me to actually start to drive, what did I notice? I noticed that I started to see a lot more red cars on the road, a lot more. I mean, like red cars I never ever dreamt were on the road. So usually I would see 2 or 3. Now I was seeing 20, 30, 40. I mean, it's like, why was everybody changing their cars just when I was changing mine? So that's an example of the reticular activation system. So what activated it was the fact that I was now focused. I was focusing my attention on red cars. And so it alerted my conscious mind that this is something that it would begin to see in my experience, on my projection screen, if you will, in my reality. I would now see red cars. So that really is the reason that goals are so important, because the reticular activation system helps us by focusing our attention on our goals to give us the possibility and to show us opportunities that we had not noticed before. They were probably there all along, but because we weren't looking for those opportunities, we just did not see them. Now, nobody ever told me when I was growing up that was, well, first of all, that goals were important. And second of all, that this was the reason that I needed to actually form and write my goals down. Because that focused attention lines me up, tells my conscious mind, this is what I'm going for. And I'm now able to bring to attention, and my unconscious mind is bringing up from the depths things that I had just pushed down before because I hadn't noticed them, right? So things that were in my unconscious mind, things that have been out there in my experience that I hadn't noticed, all of a sudden, there they are. So I'm noticing them. So one of the things that we need to be clear on is that when we have goals and we have change, remember I pointed out those, the logical levels of change in an earlier slide. So when we have a goal and we have clarity of purpose, we're actually moving from our present state, which is our model of the world. And our model of the world is built on our identity, our beliefs and values, our capability, our behavior, and our environment. That's our model of the world. Now, when we want to pivot and we want to change, we have to have a goal. And that goal gives us the clarity of where we are going. It gives us direction. It gives us purpose. And in order to get to that desired state, we have to pivot and we have to change and adapt our identity, our beliefs and values, our capability, our behavior, and our environment. So by setting our goals, it helps us in activating our own personal system. So ladies and gentlemen, this is your superpower actions number 3. So even though in COVID-19, your strategies may have to shift and change, it means that you need to review them. You need to dust them off. You need to brainstorm with your colleagues, with your friends, and you need to develop a vision for your business and for your personal self, right? And maybe they are aligned in some way. But if you don't have a vision that is beyond staying alive, then trust me, that's all you're going to do. Stay alive. So you need to have a vision that's going to compel you, that's going to draw you, that's going to bring about more opportunities for you to get where you want to go. You need to set goals. So the vision is one thing, but then you have to have goals for your business. Where am I going next? You need to train your mind importantly and your body for the future. So you have to do that in the present moment. You have to feel the draw and the pull of the goal and the vision that you have set yourself. It must be something that is going to make you super excited and motivated. The feeling that you have is really important. So check yourself, ladies and gentlemen. Think about all of what I've said, 1, 2, and 3. All those superpower actions, the I am cause to my effect, that what I say and do is important, particularly what I do, the caring and the empathy and all the actions. And of course, the vision and the clarity of purpose and keeping your feet to the fire, keeping your vision and your sights as to where exactly you want to go. So you may have some questions about who uses NLP. And all of these people here in this graphic are persons who have either been taught it by that gentleman in the suit at the top, whoops, probably because Tony Robbins, and those of you who know him, is probably one of the most celebrated motivational speakers as well as change agents in the world. He's been on so many stages and people have done his courses. I think there's one with a fire walk. There's all kinds of wonderful things. But what most people don't know is that the basis for the work that he does is neurolinguistic programming. He's actually trained as a trainer and as a coach in neurolinguistic programming. So this is really powerful stuff. And people like Serena Williams, athletes who have to perform at very high levels of mental and physical strength, they use NLP. Obama, Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, all of these guys are users of neurolinguistic programming. So where are you? Are you using these tools, some of which I have shared with you, the frameworks? How are you applying those? So the critical questions. How do you rate your knowledge and skills in these NLP principles? Firstly, on a scale of 1 to 5, Tanya.
Yes.
Yeah.
So one
one
being not so great and 5 being fantastic.
Yeah. So where are you? How effective are you at applying them? And thirdly, and this is a question we haven't asked you before. So what is your knowledge, skills, and applications gap costing you in business and life? Because if you are not using all the resources that you have at your disposal, then there's a cost to it. There's a cost because trial and error is something that a lot of us have used, but it costs you time and it costs you money. So if you know a system that is going to be able to get you where you want to go very quickly, then why the heck would you not use it? What is it costing you? So this leads me to our little question and answer time. So we have a few minutes to take any questions on what I've covered or anything else for that matter. So here's your opportunity to actually ask us any questions that you might have. Any questions, you can just type it in the chat room. Valerie, lovely to see you. And I know there are other people on this call. Hazel, good to see you. Arlene, and great. I can't believe it. Did I answer everybody's question? Nobody has anything? That's amazing. All right. So, hi, Valerie. So do you have any questions specifically to do with your business? So some of you mentioned about pivoting your business and repositioning your business. Do you have any questions around that? Hi, Melissa. Hope I pronounced that right. Okay. If you want to send it privately to me as a question, and I'll just read it out, that's fine too. So the chat box allows you to do that. Okay, so there's a question from Judith Cheese Morris. What can HR do to keep the senior management team engaged during the COVID period? Okay, could you give me a little bit more info? When you say keeping the senior management engaged, can you give me a little bit more information on that? Are they backing out, kind of closing shop? What's happening? Okay, so while Judith is coming back to me on that, I operator training. I had to close operations since March. What you suggest I do? I'm now working on some online programs. Good. That's a good option. Anyone who is in training or coaching then needs to consider, how are you going to pivot your business online? And actually, training and coaching is one of those things that is perhaps more easily transferred to the virtual environment. So I would agree with you, Shauna, that that is something that you need to pursue, because don't close. You need to be thinking about the kinds of programs now. Because remember, if you're going to think without the fear-based thinking, you're going to have to think creative now and innovation. So what kinds of programs do people need now? So from what you were offering before, maybe those programs are not relevant now in this marketplace. So what kind of programs do people need? Because anyone who is going to come to training is going to be based on a need. So in terms of your space, well, it's difficult to advise you, on a whole business model in just a few minutes on a call. But yeah, so you have space. So it may be to consider what else you can do with that space in the meantime. Maybe that's something that you need to consider. What else can I do with that space if I can't use it for training right away? Yeah, but it's brainstorming with your team. and being able to scan the environment and think outside the box. So what we call in NLP sort of lateral thinking, lateral chunking. That's one of the things. So senior management is encouraged, thank you, Judith, and is doing a great job keeping the staff engaged, checking in on them, working from home. How can we keep them from being burnt out with all that responsibility while trying to meet their strategic and divisional objectives? Great question. So, yes. So I guess it can be either extreme, like people just shutting down and doing nothing, or then people, having to really stretch themselves. I think especially if people are working from home, there is a tendency to not have as much structure. So like day and night just kind of morph into one. And you feel as if you are, you're working from your bedroom or you're working from your living room, and there is no sort of boundaries. There are no boundaries and divisions. And I think it's important, and Tanya, you may want to come in here too, because I know you're working with a number of organizations.
Yes.
It's important that we set some boundaries, and they set boundaries for themselves and give themselves time off. They need time out to be able to relax and to revive themselves before they come back the next morning. So Tanya?
Yes. And you also want to make sure that your employees and your staff, that when you're doing those morning check-ins, like setting some service level agreements within your team on when you're going to work and when work will end for the day. Because again, if people are not recouped for the day to be able to come the next day to work on something, then they're going to get burnt out. So creating some boundaries on saying, okay, guys, these are the things that we want to deliver for the week. This is going to be the working hours based on our current structure and how we're going to work for the day. So whether it's 9 to 5 or 5 to 7, whatever those times are going to be, just so people also have in their mind what the cutoff is for them for their day at work, so they can then focus on their personal life or their home life or whatever is required when they're working at home. So you want to make sure that those boundaries are set in place, but also that there's some kind of agreement on how work is going to happen and the timing for work, so everyone's on the same page.
Right. Thank you, Tanya. And just to sort of finish off that question, I think it's really important that persons are guided through coaching activities.
Yes.
And through learning some of the techniques that even we've shared here today with you, in terms of mindfulness, in terms of being able to recognize that the being aspect of them is the critical piece to the doing. And so if they don't spend time in the being part of themselves, then they're going to be sometimes busy doing, but not necessarily busy doing all of the right things, maybe not dividing up the work as it should, and just simply not taking the time to breathe. So that's really, really important. Good. All right. So thank you for those questions, and I hope you found our responses useful. So you might be wondering then, what are the next steps that you can take, or perhaps even some of your staff if you are with an organization. And so enrolling for our 6-week Unlocking Your Leadership Superpowers coaching program is one of the things that you can do. Now, what does that entail? So what's in it for me? It has got to be a WIFM. So one, achieving better outcomes. I think everybody in this room on this call wants better outcomes. And one of the ways that we can achieve better outcomes is to know how to set goals. And we think we know how to set goals, but I can tell you most people don't. And there's an NLP way to do it in order to be able to get the outcomes you want. 2, eliminating your limiting beliefs. When I talked about that, that logical level of change, then you can see right away that it's important that your beliefs sustain you in the next steps, where you want to go, where you want to pivot to. So eliminating them, anything that's holding you back, super important. Boldness to act in times of uncertainty. Some of us tend to, as I said, freeze or run in the other direction.
Yeah.
So we want to be able to be bold, not just in terms of COVID, but anything else. We're talking about building our resiliency, building our agility. You know, in project management, we talk about agile project management. So what we're building here is agile mindsets, right? So number 4, techniques to act more resourcefully and creatively. I mentioned to you that, you know, when you are in a state of fear, you are not able to be resourceful and creative. So how do we bring out the best in people? What are some of the techniques that we can use on ourselves, on our team, to help persons to be more creative and innovative? Developing your personal leadership model to produce results in any environment. So what is your personal leadership model? Skillfulness in the application of the 5 keys to getting results. Ladies and gentlemen, there are not a lot of things that you need to do, but you need to know them in order to get the results that you want. And finally, learning modeling techniques. Now, NLP is actually built on modeling and modeling of excellence. So that's the basis for the techniques that we are going to share with you and have shared with you today. So how about you being able to learn the modeling techniques for yourself so that you can model excellence in any sphere of life? And finally, to mastermind with other leaders on the cutting edge. So hands up, does that sound like something that you'd be interested in, guys? Let's see what's in this program. So the program is a group coaching program, which is virtual. So no matter where you are, you can access it. And it's 12 coaching or training contact hours, which are done over 6 weeks. So it comprises 3 webinars of 3 hours each, and they're done every other week. And in between, we have a 1-hour group coaching session. So it's an intensive program, guys. You can't get on this program and play around. And it's not for anyone and everyone. It's for really those people who want to make change, and they want to make that change now and make it work for them. So you have in-field development exercises, things that will help with the application. Some of you said, you know, how do I apply this? So this is the in-field development exercises that you will do in between the webinar and the coaching sessions. And you'll have your own workbook, which you can download and complete. And of course, what would a program be like without a certificate of participation? So of course, we'll give you that. And as a bonus, we are also going to allow you access to this What's Your Communication Style quiz and micro degree, which is online. And you can learn more about how you can understand your own learning style, your own style of communication, and also how to develop rapport with others who may not be like you. And of course, accountability groups. So we have to have accountability. So we're going to do that through a closed Facebook group and of course the WhatsApp groups. And we will be your facilitators. So Tanya and myself will be leading you through this wonderful, impactful learning experience. Now, we have a very special offer for you for Acting Now. So your Act Now individual rate is $249. Now, it's really an unbelievable price. Most things that would be offered with the kind of impact that we are offering here would be at least $600 or $700. And we are offering it for $249 only. And that is for Acting Now. So there is a price for you as an individual. And there is also an Act Now price. And some of you are in HR or have other teams that you are working with. And that Act Now price is even lower for a group rate of 3 or more. And that is US $229. And of course, that Act Now rate, which extends from now until Friday. As of Friday, it's going to go down to US $349. Sorry, go up what am I saying? It will go up to US 349 for the individual rate, and it will go up to 299 for the standard group rate. So because space is limited on the program, I am urging you to take up the offer. Now, an offer has been created, and if you press on the offer button, you will actually be able to go directly from here to the sign up and learn more about the program and actually register for it. So, ladies and gentlemen, time is limited on this offer, and space is also limited. So I urge you, if you are interested, make sure that you go ahead right now and book your spot. Do you see that offer button? If you see it, then just make sure that you press it, and it will take you directly to the offer. So registration closes on Friday. And the program begins on May the 19th. That's next week, Tuesday. And it's 5 to 8 p.m. for the webinar. And that's 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Jamaica time. So here you have the URL here, which is repeated, but it's so much easier if you just access the offer button and go right ahead now and sign up. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's really it for me. And I just want to say how excited I have been to be here. Sharing is part of my DNA. I am passionate about teaching and coaching. I believe that's my mission in life. And so I have really, really, really enjoyed sharing with you this evening. If you have any other questions, then please just put them in the chat room now before we sign off. And let me just check and see if there's anything else anyone has put there. No. Okay, great.
Great.
All right, so it's really been a pleasure to share with you. And of course, do share this offer with anyone else that you think would be interested. And as again, I urge you, take up that Act Now offer ASAP. Otherwise, you may lose your space. Brian Martin, thank you very much. Great to have your feedback. Thank you, Robert. Wonderful.
Yeah, Theo.
Thank you, Theo. Yeah, it's really great. It's been great sharing with you. Tanya, do you have any last words?
Oh, the only last words I have is that I'm really excited to be working with the individuals who we're going to be embarking on this new path in this coaching program. On a personal note, I want to share with the group that, you know, the introduction into NLP and being able to use it personally for my life, not only for business, but also for my personal life, has really changed my life, I would say, dramatically. So I started on this path about 7 years ago. And that's actually how I met Liz. But I want to say when I first embarked on being able to use these tools in my personal life, it actually, you know, improved the things that I wanted in my personal life, but also expanded where I went in business. So I was actually working for a company in corporate for many years, and, you know, embarked on doing NLP and learning how to think differently. And I would say that actually opened up so many opportunities that it actually opened up the opportunity for me to look at running my own business. So that's where it's kind of taken me personally. So I went from thinking I would have to work for someone for the rest of my life, which was death to me, but, you know, married to others. And, you know, just being able to have more than one option and thinking about something opened up so many doors for me with these tools. So I'm really happy to share that, and I'm looking forward to, you know, embarking on the journeys that each of you will have when you come through this coaching program with us.
Yes, great. Thank you, Tanya, for sharing that. You know, NLP, one of the things that it gives you is choices. Very often we come in with our model of the world and we are in our own little box. And we don't recognize that we do have choices. And speaking for myself, I think back, 10, 15 years ago, and I would never, ever have thought that I would be here now, doing something like this on Zoom, very comfortable, very confident, being able to train and coach using NLP. So indeed, it changed my life as well. And the decision to actually launch my own training and coaching business using NLP as the basis of it, and then to find partners who were of similar mind, like yourself and like Dwayne and Paul and TGL, which has now morphed into a division, TGL Smile, where we can offer NLP infused customer service training. I mean, this is something that I couldn't have done if I had not invested in my training as a NLP practitioner first, and then as NLP master practitioner, and then as a trainer. So it's really, it's been very, very impactful on my life and my business. So great, great, great to be here. And thank you very much, Ivy. It's been a really great experience sharing with you this evening. And so if you haven't already done so, just check out the offer by clicking on the offer button, and it will take you straight into the registration with, of course, giving you information on the course itself with some more details. So if you have any questions at all, then you can always connect with us through the email, which I think you have been getting from us. So you can always send in your questions through that. But I look forward, I'm really, really excited about doing this coaching program, knowing what people have been going through with COVID and the opportunity to help change minds and change lives. So I'm really looking forward to having some of you on the program. So have a wonderful, wonderful rest of evening. And I look forward to seeing you next week, Tuesday.
Great.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.